season release from the Warriors. And Premier League football club Brighton and Hove Albion have banned 3 supporters for life for being involved in serious disorder during their goalless FA Cup draw with West Brom. Brighton says the police will also investigate and seek to prosecute the 3 individuals who were involved in 3 separate incidents, including assault on a female crowd doctor, assault on a club steward and threats to stab, and assault on a visiting supporter. Koina ngā pūrongo hakinakina.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon today, new figures show a steady increase in cases of meningococcal disease since 2014. We ask a world expert why. Tips on how to get a solid 8 hours sleep. Finding ripples in the fabric of space-time with Nergis Malvavala, an astrophysicist from the team that first observed gravitation waves. Helping parents of tweens and teens find more happiness in their day-to-day lives. Join me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
On air online on iHeartRadio, Sky TV, Freeview and Vodafone Cable. The forecast from Met Service to midnight for all of the North Island, fine and hot in most places, but areas of cloud or fog morning and night. Isolated afternoon and evening showers too for the Central Plateau. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago mainly fine and hot. Some places get cloud morning and night. Buller and Westland cloudy at times with drizzle south of the glaciers tonight. Fiordlands mostly cloudy, drizzle this evening and northerlies rise to gale. Southland fine apart from areas of morning cloud and the Chatham Islands fine. In the main centres, Auckland and Hamilton fine and warm and then some cloud at night. Auckland easterly breezes and a high of 27, Hamilton light winds and 30. Tauranga fine apart from morning and evening cloud, light winds 25. Wellington fine, some late cloud, northerlies gradually picking up 24. Christchurch morning cloud clearing to fine, northeasterlies and 27. Dunedin sunny but evening cloud, nor'easters strengthening this evening and a high of 27. You're listening to RNZ National. It's 9 minutes past 8.
And you're listening to Morning Report on RNZ National. A group of Indian students who were deported from New Zealand say their lives are ruined, and Labour MPs who promised to help them have abandoned them. Jacinda Ardern and Andrew Little publicly supported 9 students 2 years ago while they were in opposition, when the students took sanctuary at Auckland's Unitarian Church to avoid being sent home. The group claimed they were victims of a dodgy Indian immigration agency which falsified documents on their behalf but without their knowledge. Now, some of the students are speaking out, saying they feel like they were pawns of Labour electioneering. Their lawyer is Alistair McClymont, and he's on the line now. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Giles. Thanks for having me.
Now, just first of all, can you just bring us up to date with what is the state of play for the students?
Well, there are a very small group of students who have applications currently before the Associate Minister of Immigration. From our office, there's a group of around about 9. Half of those are taking sanctuary in the church and the other half are not part of that particular group. So we're just waiting for those decisions.
And all of them are in India?
I represent a much larger group than just the ones who are in the church. Some of them have returned to India, some of them are actually physically deported, some of them are still in New Zealand and have disappeared and gone underground.
Let's look at their complaints about Labour. Really, what were they expecting? Andrew Little, for instance, said he would take up their case and that he would write to the Minister of Immigration, Michael Woodhouse, at the time, and he did. What were they expecting when Labour got into power? Were any promises given to them?
Yeah, I mean, while they were taking sanctuary in the church, there were a number of MPs who visited them from both the Labour Party and the Green Party, who all made very similar statements along the lines of, well, look, if you were basically ripped off by agents and you knew nothing about what was happening, then you should be allowed to stay. And those were the promises made by a large number of MPs. And this is pretty much what the ongoing investigations by Immigration New Zealand and Ombudsman concluded, that there is no evidence whatsoever that the students knew anything about the agent-generated fraud. Then, when this Ombudsman decision came out, we all went back to the MPs and said, hey, now's the time to do what you promised to do.
But the decision was made by a national minister, wasn't it?
Well, the Ombudsman investigation came out just last year under this current government. And that's so once the new government came in late 2017, they basically sort of kicked for touch and said, well, let's just wait and see what the Ombudsman has to say.
There is due process here, though, isn't it, that has to be followed, and you can understand that Labour, now in government, has to be seen to be acting objectively and fairly, hands off.
Yeah, but what is this process? I mean, every time the Minister of Immigration is asked about an immigration issue, he always responds by saying, "Well, the correct process was followed." But what's the purpose of this process? What is this process designed to achieve? I mean, it could be designed simply for expediency, for budget constraints. It could be because Immigration New Zealand don't have the resources to investigate properly. So simply saying that a process is being followed is quite inconsistent with this current government's claim that they are a government of compassion and empathy, which is what our Prime Minister said when she was elected. And there's a real inconsistency between the two things.
Well, reform might well be needed, but that also takes time. In the meantime, the actual process for these students and for the reconsideration of their position does have to follow a certain course, and it's fair enough that the Minister should stand back from that. The applications are currently before the Associate Minister. The Associate Minister of Immigration can make a decision within a couple of minutes if he wants to. There's no need for him to wait for anything. The Associate Minister can make decisions, immediately, within a day, a week, or whatever is required. So it's really in the Associate Minister's hands now. Is this taking too long in your view? Do you just want an immediate decision that says you're all exonerated, you were all victims of a rip-off, come back?
No, there were a large number of students who were involved in this particular agent-generated fraud in India. Immigration investigations discovered that some of the students knew what the agents were doing and some of the students didn't. So each individual case does need to be assessed on its own merits. The particular group of students who were in the church knew absolutely nothing about what this agency were doing, and Immigration New Zealand's investigation agreed that the fraud was agent-generated because they were being paid huge amounts of commission by New Zealand schools.
Do they want to come back to New Zealand?
Well, absolutely, because they are heavily indebted to come and study here. In fact, almost all of the students who come to New Zealand from India to study are heavily indebted. So the reason that they come here to study is because of the promises of work that is given associated with the study. And without those work rights, they simply cannot repay the debts.
What was the last communication you got from the Associate Minister?
The applications were received. Even in December, we filed another couple of applications, and they haven't even entered those into the system yet. So there's basically nothing. So far, there's just silence.
Have you been given any time frame as to when a decision might be made?
No applications to the Associate Minister. There are no time frames. He makes the decision when he makes the decision.
Are you confident that the decision will go your client's way?
To be honest, not overly, because of the promises that were made prior to the election, which have been broken repeatedly. No, but this is the opportunity for the government to actually stand up and make a statement that, yes, it's a government of compassion and empathy for all people, including migrants, and not just for New Zealanders.
Thank you for your time this morning. That's Alistair McClymont, the lawyer for a group of Indian students. It's 16 minutes past 8. You're listening to Morning Report on RNZ National. Well, to truancy, and more than 258,000 children failed to attend school regularly last year, and Year 13 girls were the worst offenders. Education Ministry annual attendance survey says children who missed more than 5 days of school in Term 2 last year are not going to school regularly. And over the course of an entire year, some are missing far too many lessons. It says nearly 64% of children were regular attenders in 2018. That's slightly higher than 2017's record low of 63%, but still well below the Ministry's target of 70%. The man who knows about these things is our education correspondent, John Gerritsen. He joins us now. What's behind such a high level of truancy?
Well, Giles, illness appears to be the single most common reason that most children were absent from school in Term 2 during the survey period last year. Now, overall, just over half of all the absences that occurred in that time were justified, as in there was an acceptable reason or excuse. But of course, that leaves more than 40% of absences being unjustified. Now, truancy is a factor there, but also people taking their children on holiday early. The report says the number of children doing that during term time actually doubles in that final week of Term 2.
So, in particular, Year 13 girls have the worst attendance record. Why that age group? Why girls?
Well, looking at these figures, it's pretty clear that attendance declines as students get older, particularly in those secondary school years, to the point where there's a big drop-off at year 13, and especially for year 13 girls. Only 42% of year 13 girls attended school regularly in term 2 last year, so that's missing no more than 5 days of school. And the figure for year 13 boys was 47%, so year 13 girls were far and away the worst offenders there. There's other ways of cutting these figures if you look at them by school decile. Decile 1 schools were the only group where fewer than 50% of students attended regularly in term 2. There were big differences by ethnicity. About half of Māori and Pasifika students attended regularly compared to 75% of Asian students. And finally, you can look at it by area. Carterton District and Orake in Auckland had the highest rates of regular attendance at 75%, and the worst was Kawerau with just 38%.
Of course, it does raise the issue. What's the ministry doing about it to increase the level of attendance?
Well, it's been saying consistently to schools that attendance really matters for achievement. The more regularly the students are at school, the more likely it is they'll achieve NCA level 1. And of course, that's really regarded as the starting point for children's school careers. So they've been pushing schools, encouraging them to, in turn, stress the importance of attendance. But we haven't really seen a big change here. There used to be a regular attendance rate around 69.5%. It reached a low of 63% in 2017, and these figures show there's been a very slight bounce, 63.8% last year. Now, the ministry says, look, even if you're just on the cusp of regular attendance, so missing maybe a little bit more than 5 days of school in term 2, over a year, that really adds up. And they're talking about, an entire a month of school off over the entire year. And there's a very small group who are chronically absent. 6% of children missed 30% or more of term 2 last year, and there's real concern about them.
So does it come down to the ministry or to the schools who need to put in the effort to get the kids there? And for instance, we've heard in the past about the lack of resources to chase up on kids wagging school, truancy issue. I mean, is there enough resource being put into the overall issue? I
think for the moderate absences, so those who are just on the cusp of not being regular attenders, that's very much down to the schools. But there is a lot of disquiet, a lot of unhappiness about the various attendance services around the country. They're wrestling with some really difficult issues, and in many cases, schools say they're just not doing the job.
Thank you very much. That's John Gerritsen, our education correspondent, 20 minutes past 8.
Let's take a look at traffic news. In Wellington in Te Aro, there's a crash blocking access to Victoria Street from Caro Drive. Please try to use an alternative route if you can and expect delays. Also, there's been a crash just north of Porirua on State Highway 1 at Parramatta Bridge. It's been cleared. Traffic is now, though, very heavy in both directions. Please take extra care and expect delays. If you're driving that way this morning, also just north of Auckland, State Highway 1 at Dome Valley, concrete panel blocks have fallen off a truck and they're blocking some lanes. Now, NZTA is asking drivers to please avoid that area as they are in the process of clearing it. Now, 20 minutes past 8 on Morning Report, a 38-year-old man with terminal bowel cancer says there are huge failings in how New Zealand deals with cancer patients. Blair Vining was told he had between 6 and 8 weeks to live, but would spend 8 to 10 weeks on the wait list before getting treatment. Today he'll be sharing his story at a conference led by the Cancer Society, Otago University and the Ministry of Health. But before that, Blair Vining is in the studio with us. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm well, but I guess more importantly, how are you? And tell us a bit about your story and how you first discovered that this was the situation for you.
I'm actually doing all right. I've just had some good news and I've got another 3 months from the treatment that we're going through. Seems to be working at the moment, but cancer is very tricky and it will figure out, how we're beating it, and it will try and come back at us. But, there's always another drug there that we can throw at it. And but it has been a very, very difficult time in the last 3 months, but also it's shown me a lot of how much people actually love getting behind and supporting something like this.
What were the first symptoms that you had?
So I had a little bit of breathing trouble and a blood clot in my leg, and then I went to the doctor. I just drove myself down, not thinking there was anything wrong.
Down to your GP?
Down to the A&E at the hospital at Southland, and then I found out that I had 8 blood clots in my lungs and the top of my liver was riddled with tumours.
That must have been quite a thing to have told to you.
Yes, it was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
Just to go in there for a little breathing trouble and then come out with a terminal illness is not something that you expect every time you go to the doctor. But
how did you begin to process that, to make sense of that, and for your family to deal with it?
Well, I had to call my wife in because I was here by myself, obviously. But it was just one of those things that they tell you, and there's no coming back from that. And if they say it's terminal, obviously you're not in a good state. But just being positive and putting your hand up and owning it and making it my ride to the end, and just being really positive is the only thing that really gets us through.
It almost feels, and forgive me using this, but it almost feels comical being told you've got between 6 and 8 weeks to live, but you've got to be 8 to 10 weeks on the wait list.
Yes, it's not the result that we need as cancer patients. We need to get seen within 1 to 2 days to try and get us through faster so we can stop that backlog from building up again.
Because that's a situation where, theoretically, you would be dead before you actually got your first treatment.
Correct.
Did the medical profession see that? Did they grasp what they were saying to you in that information?
They felt very sorry for me. They were very, very upset for me. The doctors and the nurses have done an amazing job, really, really good at what they do, but it's the plan that they don't have in front of them to follow, which is the big issue.
So what kind of plan does there need to be in your view?
So there needs to be a viewing plan for at least the people that get diagnosed with stage whatever cancer. They need to at least have guidelines that they have to stick to, otherwise no one will get seen, and then everyone will just end up dying with their cancer before they get seen because the backlog will just get bigger and bigger.
And this has to be across the country, so it doesn't matter where you're diagnosed, you still get the treatment?
Because there is a big difference in the country of where you are in the country. Depends on what type of treatment you get. Like down in Southland, we're the worst in the country, and New Zealand's the worst in the world at bowel cancer, so that makes Southland put its hand up and say, hey, we're the worst at it. And I unfortunately was in that, but it took us 19 phone calls and we got some things sorted out, and now we went private, and I'm lucky enough to have private medical insurance, and it seems to be working really well. But if I did go on the public one, I wouldn't be here today.
So what did having the private medical insurance mean that you had access to?
A lot faster treatment time. So I got treated 3 weeks after I got diagnosed. And then that very next day my bowel blocked and I had to go to Christchurch, which is one of the symptoms that they said hardly very happens, but it happened to me, and it took 13 hours in A&E waiting for a decision for the doctors just to move me on to a guy that could actually operate on me in Christchurch.
Okay.
But it took 13 hours because there's no plans, there's no, it's just the government needs to make a plan today to try and stop cancer. It's the biggest killer in New Zealand population, and 44% of us in New Zealand have got it.
What's your message going to be to the Minister of Health today? He's going to be at this conference. What are you going to tell him? I'm
going to tell him to pull his head in and put his foot down and start this thing today. Not tomorrow, not the next day, today. It needs to be done today, and that's why we're all there. We're all there wanting the same answers. We need a cancer treatment plan.
Do you think he's going to be sympathetic to hearing that and will actually do it?
I don't know. Everyone's different, but I'm not trying to go there to make people cry and feel sorry for me. I'm just going there to make shit happen.
Well, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate you coming into the studio as well. That is Blair Vining, who is going to be at this conference led by the Cancer Society, Otago University and the Ministry of Health. It's 26 minutes past 8.